As winter approaches, many of us are looking forward to our next Virgin voyage. And one of the best ways to make that time go even quicker is to get the planning absolutely right for when you're next on board. So whether you're looking forward to your first Virgin voyage or if you sailed before, today we're going to look at 5 insider tips of how to plan the perfect Virgin voyage, including a bonus tip which we would never sail without doing. And I'm going to come on to that at the end of this video. I'm David from VV Insider, and today we're going to look at everything from booking your perfect voyage to making sure your dining is reserved well in advance of you sailing, how to find the absolute perfect cabin for your needs, some tips on checking the events and shows that are going to be on your particular sailing, as well as what that might mean for your packing list. We're going to make sure that you make the most of every single port and destination that you're going to visit. And then we're going to take a look at a way how you can make your money go further when you're buying drinks on board. So there's tons for us to look at, so let's jump right in. VV Insider is the #1 resource for the latest Virgin Voyages info, guides and news. From picking the perfect cabin to booking dining, or simply just making the most of your voyage and saving money while you do it, VVinsider.com has helped thousands of sailors around the world sail smarter. Support our work by hitting subscribe and stick around to hear how you can get exclusive perks by booking directly with us. So first things first, you're going to want to make sure that you're booking your Virgin voyage in the right way to save the most money possible, but also get those inclusive perks that you're entitled to as well. So of course, if you've done any research in this area already, you'll know the best way to make sure that you're maximizing your savings, offers and deals is to work with a first mate, because they're always going to make sure that you not only get the best deal possible, but also will check to see if there are any live offers available for you specifically. So for example, first mates will check to see whether you get military discounts, any discounts based on where you live, so for example a Florida resident discount, as well as any exclusive perks that the first mate is able to offer as well. And a good thing here, as long as you're working with a reputable first mate, you'll never be spending any more on your voyage than you would if you went to Virgin Voyages direct. So if you're normally in that category where you do book direct, maybe next time think about getting in touch with a first mate to see what they might be able to offer. So just as an example, we work with a partner first mate, and on some particular sailings they can get you up to $400 in sailor loot just by booking in advance. And on top of that, here at VV Insider, if you book through us, you'll also get a few other perks as well, but I'll come on to that later on. But if you want to have a look right now, go to vvinsider.com/book and you can read all about it. But for right now, let's talk about voyage pricing. Now, the prices of voyages can be a little bit of a mystery, and generally it does depend on the type of cabin that you're staying in and the itinerary that you're choosing. And this normally boils down to, if it's a very popular itinerary, it is going to be more expensive. But one thing to note as well is that the pricing for voyages is very dynamic and it fluctuates. It goes up and down depending on how many of each cabin type is being sold. Ordinarily, if you're looking yourself, this means that you have to visit the Virgin Voyages website and keep refreshing every single day to see if the price has gone up and down. Well, this is the first free planning tool I want to tell you about. So if you head over to vvinsider.com and search for a particular voyage. So just for an example, I've searched for the Red Hot voyage on Brilliant Lady next year. And this is the page that you'll see for that particular voyage. So here it'll give you an idea of the current pricing, as well as the itinerary and the ports that the sailing will be stopping at. But here's where it gets even better. If you scroll down to the bottom of this page, you'll see this table, which will show you the pricing and availability history. And what this shows is the lowest price for 2 sailors in each of these cabin categories. But what this allows you to do is get a sense for how much these cabins are generally priced at, and it'll help you decide whether now is a great time to snap up that cabin. So actually, this is a great example showing you that now is the time to strike on this insider cabin, because historically this cabin last month cost $3,098, whereas now it's on sale for $2,502. So this is much cheaper than it used to be last month. So now is a great time to strike before that price goes up again. But because this tool is available for every single voyage in the system, if you're looking at a particular voyage and you're not sure whether now is the right time to book, head over to vvinsider.com and check out your voyage to see how those cabins are traditionally priced. And when you're ready to make a booking, simply hit book now in the currency of your choice, and we can be connected to your booking as your first mate and make sure you get all the perks and discounts that we can give. Now remember, when you're making your booking, the new voyage fare choices that Virgin Voyages have released will determine your booking slot for your dining. So this will range all the way from 120 days before your sailing if you choose a Rockstar suite, or 15 days before the sailing if you choose a base fare or a lock-it-in rate. And of course, this might determine whether you're able to get the restaurant of your choice for the times that you want. So this is really a personal decision for yourself. We're going to go into a lot more detail for dining and reservations in an upcoming video. So make sure that you stay subscribed to this channel, and we're going to take you through how to snag the restaurant of your choice, including some real insider tips as well. So make sure you stay subscribed. Moving on to tip number 2, and that's to make sure that you have the right cabin. Now, if you know much about Virgin Voyages ships, each of the 4 lady ships are very, very similar, especially when it comes to which cabins they offer. So every single one of the ships has insider cabins, sea terrace cabins, Rockstar suites, etc. But one thing you might not know if you've not sailed with Virgin before is that not all of these cabins are built the same. And also, some of the locations on the ships mean that your experience will differ as well. So what do I mean by this? Well, if you choose a sea terrace cabin, for example, you could be placed very snugly in the middle of all of the cabin decks. So perhaps you're on deck 10 or 11, in which case it's very unlikely that you're going to get a lot of noise from either event spaces or operational areas. But you could have been placed on deck 8, where actually you're only one deck away from where some events and some parties might be happening every single night. So it really pays to check your cabin assignment. Now, briefly returning to when we talked about voyage fare choices, if you've chosen a base fare or a lock-it-in rate, you're not going to be able to change your cabin assignment as freely as before. Not least, you might not actually know your cabin assignment, for example, if you're on a lock-it-in rate, in which case this advice doesn't apply to you. But if you've chosen Essential or Premium or one of the Rockstar suites, you're able to visit the VV Insider Cabin Lookup tool and put the number of the assigned cabin that you have into the tool, and it will tell you everything you need to know about that particular cabin. So let's say, for example, I've just made a booking and I have my confirmation email through. My cabin assignment is on deck 8 and my cabin number is 8322A. I'm just going to pop that into the tool and then I'm going to hit check my cabin. So right away, I'm going to get all of the information I'm going to need about that particular cabin. So I can see that my cabin is an XLC terrace, so that makes sense. It sleeps up to 3 sailors and they can set up an extra lower bed if there's 3 in the cabin. It also tells me the bed orientation and position. So sometimes the beds are placed either closer to the window or closer to the bathroom. And this will really be a personal preference. Where would you prefer to have more room in the cabin? So for example, if you want to position a chair near the window because you like sitting next to the window, you might want to choose a cabin that has more space on that side. Or if you want the cabin to feel roomier when you step into the room, maybe you want to choose a room where the bed is actually placed off towards the window so you have more area when you step in. Again, this is a personal preference and this tool will tell you exactly what you'll need to know. And now we come down to the really important bit. So this is where we've done the hard work at VV Insider to try and understand what the good points and what the bad points of each cabin location will be. And this is information that we've put together by looking at all of the deck plans, but also we've had some really useful feedback from the sailor community. So people have actually told us when they've stayed in a cabin that's been particularly noisy, and we'll go in to make sure that our data reflects that so you can make the right decision. Things that we've noticed about this particular cabin is that it has one of those iconic red hammocks. Some cabins don't, so you want to check for that. It has a glass balcony. Again, some cabins have a metal balcony. And then some unique things about this particular cabin. So actually, this cabin has a larger balcony than others. And that's just based on where it sits on the deck plan. So you'll get a bit of extra room in the balcony. So that's worth knowing. But there are a couple of bad points about this cabin as well. So for example, we've noticed that this cabin is next to some noisy operational areas and also might be close to noisy venues as well. So it really just depends on what your personal preference is. Would you like that extra balcony space and can put up with a bit of that extra noise? It's entirely up to you. But again, this really comes down to personal preference. That's why you should always check the cabin that you've been assigned. And that's why we think it's one of the most important planning tips. So always make sure you're checking your cabin. Now tip number 3, which is all about understanding which events and shows are going to be available on your sailing. And this is where Virgin Voyages really comes into its own, because the entertainment shows and nightlife on Virgin Voyages is very unique. You're not going to see big production shows that you would see on land on Virgin Voyages. So for example, there's no Hairspray or Grease or Mamma Mia, but instead you get really unique produced shows that are only available on the Virgin Voyages fleet. And because they're very unique, you might not understand what you're going into before you step on board the ship. And some of this is by design. Quite a lot of the Virgin Voyages brand is about discovering new things and being challenged. But after running this website for 2 years, my husband and I have realized that some Virgin Voyages sailors would rather know what they're getting themselves into before they step on board the ship. And that's why we put an incredible amount of effort in explaining what to expect when it comes to these events and shows before you step on board. Because it's worth knowing if it's something that you're going to enjoy or not. You only have a certain number of nights on the ship. And sometimes if the events don't sound like they're for you, you might want to spend time doing something else. Also, some of these events are scheduled side by side, so you might want to decide which event to go to out of the two, for example. So another one of the unmissable tools that you can use is on the homepage, head over to events. And on the events page, you're going to see every single one of the events listed for every single one of the ships. So we've got information about iconic shows like Lola's Library, Dual Reality, The Mind Mangler, Out of Time, Up with a Twist, Another Rose, the list goes on. And what's more, if you click into any one of these events, you can read a full synopsis of what to expect when you go through those doors. And this is particularly important when it comes to paid for events. So most entertainment is free on board Virgin Voyages, but there are the odd dinner show, cabaret, class that you do have to pay for. And some of the descriptions that you'll see on the Virgin Voyages app are a little bit light on detail, and it's not easy to understand whether it's worth paying for or not. So we break this down really easily for you, not only in the articles on vvinsider.com, but also we have a few videos on this YouTube channel which goes through what to expect at some of these events as well. And one thing to watch out for if you're in for a bit of fun is events that actually come with a little bit of a guide of what you might want to wear. So this is kind of like those themed nights that you would see on other cruise ships, but Virgin Voyages have a few events that they encourage sailors to dress their best for. And some of these really depend on which ship that you're on, but you do want to always check on this guide on the website, which is called Planning Outfits for Themed Night. And this will walk you through each of the events and each of the ships that you'll expect to see those events on. So just as an example, if you look at Resilient Lady, they have 2 special events where you can choose to dress up. One of them is called We Fancy, and they encourage you to wear glittering gold on that night. And the other is Club Rubik's, which is a lot of fun, where people don 80s style dress up for an 80s themed club night. This of course is on top of the PJ party, where you would wear pajamas, and Scarlet Night, which both of those events happen on all of the ships. Again, it's always well worth making sure that you check this list before you start packing for your big Virgin Voyages trip. Tip number 4 is about making sure that you're ready for your ports and destinations. And this could be about choosing the right shore things or excursions that you want to book with Virgin Voyages, but also it's always worth having a look to see whether you can plan some of your own activities. And that way you can not only save money, but also you might do something more unexpected that you wouldn't be able to do with Virgin Direct. So one thing that's been really popular with planning lately is to see whether AI tools can help you plan out your excursions and activities. So just as an example here, I've chosen a random voyage on vvinsider.com and I've copied and pasted the itinerary, and I'm going to paste it into ChatGPT with a prompt of, can you come up with a list of excursions and activities I can do at each of these ports? So I'm just going to paste in the itinerary list and I'm going to hit send and see what happens. So as you can see here, it's taken the itinerary list and it's starting to build out a list of different activities and excursions that I can do at each of these ports. If you've not used AI for these purposes before, I definitely recommend giving it a go because you can start interrogating and going down into more detail as well. So if there's a particular activity or excursion that I'm interested in, you can start just asking more and more questions. How much would that cost? How far is it away from the port? I think you'll be quite surprised to see how much these tools actually know about the world and how much fun you can have at a port without having to book one of the direct excursions. Just one thing to be aware of is that if you plan to do this and choose your own fun, you are running the risk that you're not going to make it back to the ship in time. One of the big advantages of booking a direct excursion through Virgin Voyages is that they will always guarantee that you'll be back at the ship, or of course they'll make arrangements to get you to the next stop comfortably if there was some problem getting you back to the ship. That of course is not going to be a guarantee if you're going off and booking your own excursion, so do be conscious of that before you go down that route. Now tip number 5 is all about making sure you're making the most of your budget when it comes to buying drinks on board. Unlike most other cruise lines, Virgin Voyages do not have a normal drink package. So there's no option, unfortunately, to pay a particular amount each day and drink as much as you like. Every single drink is charged a la carte. Unfortunately, the drink prices are pretty reasonable. They're kind of what you would expect to pay if you go to a large city, for example. But it does mean every single time you're asking for a drink from the bar, unless of course it's a soft drink, which are all included, but if you're asking for an alcoholic or a specialty drink at a bar, you are always going to have to pay for that separately, unless of course you're a mega rock star, in which case you get all of your drinks included. Now this does mean that sometimes it's difficult to budget. Well, actually on vvinsider.com, we invented a tool a couple of years ago called the Bar Tab Calculator, and it's become extremely popular in helping sailors save money when they get on board. And here's a quick explainer of how it helps you do that. So the Bar Tab on Virgin Voyages is a drink credit that you pre-purchase before you get on board. In order to reward you for pre-paying for your drinks, Virgin Voyages actually give you a free amount of money on top, and this can be anything from 12.5% to 25% depending on how much you add onto your bar tab. Now all of this can get very, very confusing if you're trying to figure this all out for yourself. Well, worry not, we come to the rescue for you. So if you go to the Bar Tab Calculator and scroll down, you can start entering the details of your voyage. Tell us about the voyage. How many nights is it? So let's say I'm on a 7-night voyage. How much existing or promotional bar tab do you have? Again, if you work with the right first mate, then you might get some bar tab or some promotional credit before you even start sailing. But let's say, for example, I've got $150 of promotional credit to start with. I can say whether I'm a sailing club member, because on particular levels of the loyalty program, you get a bar tab bonus. So let's say yes. And then the fun bit, we can start theorizing about how much we want to drink per day on our voyage. So this is a combined total for the whole cabin. So let's say between us, we're going to drink 4 glasses of wine. Then we might be at a show on the night time. So let's have a couple of beers. Then of course, we're going to be out enjoying the club nights as well. So let's have a couple of cocktails and a couple of spirits as well. So once I've added all that in, I can then scroll down and it will tell me whether I need to pay for an extra bar tab and how much money that might save. And because this is live and reactive, I can play around with the numbers and see whether I can save money or drink a little more, depending on how the bar tabs are calculated. So in this example, the advice that the bar tab calculator is giving me is that I will need to pay for a $200 bar tab and a $300 bar tab, and that would give me $125 of free drinks. So my advice there is to never blindly apply a bar tab credit, because you might end up with more than you need or not as much as you need. And if you do end up with more than you need, it's not transferable or refundable. So it is a case of use it or lose it. So be very careful and make sure you head over to the bar tab calculator. Okay, so now my special bonus tip, and this is something that I could never sail without. And that is to make sure that you're signing up to the Facebook group that is connected to your sailing. Now, depending on how popular the group is, you'll generally have around 200 or 300 people that are all sailing on the same Virgin voyage that you're sailing on. And this is so useful because you're able to ask really specific questions, not only about the port, but also the time of year that you're sailing as well. So just as an example, it's because of Facebook groups like this that we learned that there was a marathon happening in Barcelona when we were due to be departing one day, and we were able to get a taxi earlier in the morning so that we avoided some of that traffic. Now, this is stuff that you're not going to pick up unless you join the Facebook group. It's really, really valuable. But it also means that you can start to meet other sailors before you sail as well. One of the best aspects about cruises is meeting people when you voyage. And sometimes that's quite difficult, especially if you're introverted or don't like speaking to strangers. Well, on Facebook, it's a really good place to just introduce yourself to everyone before you set sail. And it's a good place to spark off conversations and talk about plans before you even get on board. It's through the use of Facebook groups like this that we've met some lifelong friends ourselves and have sailed with them many, many times. So I couldn't recommend it enough. Sometimes it is quite difficult to find the exact Facebook group for your sailing, not least because us British seem to disagree with the Americans on how to format a date correctly. So the 3rd of March could be 3/1 or 1/3, depending on where you live. So it makes searching for these particular groups very, very difficult indeed. But we've made it really easy. So if you head over to the website and click on FB groups, you'll get a list of all the Virgin Voyages Facebook groups. So if you scroll down, you can choose the ship that you're sailing on, and also the date that you're sailing in. And if you scroll down, you'll see a link for each of the Facebook groups for those sailings as well. Now, of course, not every sailing has a Facebook group yet. There are over 400 different sailings happening in the future, and some of them aren't until 2027. So you might be booked on a sailing that doesn't have a Facebook group yet. Well, there's nothing stopping you setting up that Facebook group and letting us know about it. Facebook make this really easy, and if you'd like to manage that Facebook group and start building up that community of sailors before you even set sail, then we have some advice on how to do that. So if you go over to our page, we have a page dedicated to setting up a Facebook group. We give you some tips and pointers on how to do that, including how to name your group to get as many sailors as possible when people are searching Facebook, and some guides on how to be as helpful as possible to your new sailor community. But the most important step of all is to come back to VV Insider and tell us about your new group so we can list it on our website, so we can get it out to as many people as possible and start helping you build your little community of sailors for your voyage. So you've seen some incredibly sophisticated tools that we've been able to put together to help make planning your Virgin Voyage as simple and as fun as possible. Now, we make all of these tools freely available to every single sailor in the world. Many of those very thankful sailors have went that extra step, and to thank us and help support building more of these tools, they've chosen VV Insider to help them plan their next Virgin Voyage by bringing us in as your first mate. And we have had some incredible feedback lately about the service that we've been able to offer them, not only as the #1 Virgin Voyages resource in the world, but also as an incredibly supportive and helpful first mate as well. So if you'd like to support the work that we do here at VV Insider, make sure to consider us as your first mate when you're booking your next Virgin Voyage. It's really as easy as just heading over to the website and clicking book. In any currency worldwide, you're booking directly on the Virgin Voyages website, but we'll be linked to your booking, so we'll be able to guide you and support you. So as soon as your booking is made and your deposit is paid for, we'll send you a personal email to kick things off and start planning your Virgin Voyage with the help of our fantastic tools on the website and our expert knowledge as well. So I can't wait to help you plan your perfect Virgin Voyage. Let's work together on it. Well, I'll be back next week with a Virgin Voyages Insider update, talking about all the news that's happened across the fleet over the past couple of weeks. So until then, and until I see you again, happy sailing.